Welcome to my series. This is episode 3, School Credits. Now, this happened in 1996, near the end of my school year, finishing what was probably one of the funniest years in my lifetime, 1996. That was, the start of it was my doing. I had perfect attendance in 1995, but after 2 months in 1996, I fell duped to this job. You know how they say, oh, we're hiring so and so in the newspaper. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. So I had my stepdad. I said, please take me to this job interview. Please take me. And I missed a day of school so I can go to it. He knew it was a scam. He read it in the paper. He knew it was a scam. I should have known it was a scam, but I was too stupid. I was so eager to make money and get a job because I was starving. I was a poor kid. But I didn't care. I was a happy kid. But I ruined my perfect attendance because of that. Now, flash forward at the near end of 1996, there was like a BS class they give you where they say, well, you can work for credit, but working outside your school. And at the time, my school had like 4 places I was sponsored by the high school because my high school was in a city, Bell Gardens. Adjacent to the city was, if you go down south, it was Southgate. If you go north, it was Bandini. And since kindergarten, grade school, Bandini and Bell Gardens were connected by the bus line. So all of us kids went to school in high school because we're connected to those 2 schools. It was like if you were in Bell Gardens and you lived on, like, I think it was like the west side, which I lived on, which was by Bell Gardens, by the like Specht Avenue, by Toys R Us and everything. We would go to BGI, Bell Gardens Intermediate School. If you lived on the east side and you went to BGI or another school, you either go to Suva Elementary, but then you go to high school because we only had one high school. And the kids who lived in Bandini, there was no high school. So from Bandini, which was in the city of Commerce, you went to Bell Gardens, if that all makes sense. It was just funny how that was. Well, what happened was in 1996, before my year ended, to get extra credits, because I wanted to make sure I was ready to go, get the credits requirement, I worked at my first place, which was say 1986. It was the winter of 1996, and I got my BS class was they gave me a job at Eddie Bauer at the Citadel Mall in Commerce, which was pretty funny because I went there with my sister like 6 years ago. She took me out to eat, bought me some shoes. We walked through there, and I looked around, and I was like, "Where's Eddie Bauer at?" Wasn't there no more. And I told her the story, and she said, first thing she said to me, she goes, "How many people you call fat?" And I looked at her and I said, "Well, let me tell you that story first." But before we tell that story, let's go back to 1993. September of 1993, I was a freshman in high school, ready to start. I had already quit the football team. Supposedly, they didn't have a helmet to fit my big head. And I was like, I didn't care anyways. I thought we were moving to Washington. We never did. Yada, yada, yada. All that stuff happened. But as I tell people the funniest story about football, my coach, he was a nice guy. He wasn't mean. He was, but what he said, which he says something that to this day, no coaches could ever say that to kids now because parents would be so mad if they said that, which is funny. My football coach, I remember we were all there. This was like a week before high school started. He looked at all of us, got us all in a huddle for every practice, and I'm sitting there going like, I can't wait to quit this thing. He said, "Gentlemen, I will not cut one single player." And we all thought, oh, that's pretty cool. That's nice of him. And then he finishes off, "But I don't have to play you." And then he walked away. And I sat there thinking, yeah, I don't think you can say that now to kids because parents will be like, why am I a kid on the team? I can't even play. But it was funny though. Okay, let's go back to winter. Wait, I'm sorry. Before we go back to winter, let's go back to what I just said about the football. We started in 1993. I started high school. I was excited. A lot of my friends from BGI, that was all great. Carlos, my number one bud, who I've known since 1991. First thing he says when he gets his transcripts for the classes, he looks at me and he goes, "I wonder how many, I don't want to say the word, but he said the B word, are going to be here from Suva. Now we get to see what they look like." And I looked at him thinking, I don't care about women. I just want to graduate from my mama. But I just like, whatever, Carlos. That's Carlos. I love the guy to this day. He says those one-liners. Well, so we go now to the first assembly. It was like that Wednesday, and all of us were in there, and the assembly, I forgot who was the person in charge of all of us freshmen. Like, she was like the person who was like our mascot. And our teacher was talking to us saying, "You're all freshmen. The next 4 years are going to be so yada, yada, yada. Everyone's going to be like, this is how it's going to be. You're going to go through so many changes and so many stuff." And I sat there not knowing, like, I'm wondering too. But they did say one thing. Well, two important things they said to me. One, they said, you need like 250 credits to graduate. Every class is like so and so. This is how it amounts to. You're going to whatever. And then the second thing she said was, just remember, all these people you see here, not every single one of you, not everyone is going to graduate together, because life happens, meaning they're going to move. They're not going to pass. All this other stuff happened. Didn't matter. So now we go to 1996, winter 1996. For my class, it was a class. You had the choice between Eddie Bauer, I think it was a couple of fast food places, and you had Toys R Us. My mom had stopped working at Toys R Us by then, but I knew Toys R Us like the back of my hand, because the Star Wars toys, everything that was going on, I knew everything about it. But I wanted to go to Eddie Bauer because I just wanted to see what, like, that was the path that told me to go to Eddie Bauer. So I fill out my paper, and my teacher's like, here's the 4 days you're working there for the school credit. Now, of course, we had a bus system back then, but I didn't have any money for a bus. My mom had this bike though. It was a nice regular bike. It was pink. I didn't think about it. I rode the bike every day to my job at Eddie Bauer. Not thinking now as an adult that riding a bike to work, and the place was about a 20-minute bike ride. That kind of sucked, because the fact that you'd be sweaty and everything else. But you didn't think about that. Your mind wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff. I wish now. I hope I didn't smell at that time. Well, I got a job there, and let me tell you, Eddie Bauer was so freaking boring. If I'm guessing if I was more like proactive and I liked talking to people, I would have had a great time. Everything would have been fine. But at that time, I wasn't really talking to much people outside of my circle that I didn't know of. So I worked there. I folded clothes, walked the floor asking people to need help, and it was boring. It was so boring. But the funny part about that job, the best part, I always tell people when I see someone wearing Eddie Bauer gear through my lines and everything, I go to them and I say, my favorite part was when the first guy would come to me and say, "Yeah, do you have this in a medium?" And I look at the guy quietly in my head thinking, you can't fit that. But I have to go in the back and go, "Let me check." I'm thinking, there's no freaking way this guy's going to fit into a medium. Then I would have a girl come in saying, "Can I fit in medium?" And I'm looking at her thinking, "Lady, you cannot fit that." Or they'll be like, "Let me have a large." And I'm like, that's not going to happen. But I sit there all the time and just smiled and did my best, did my 4 hours, left. At times they said, "Oh, you could apply to work here if you want. You could apply, get paid." I did that a few times, but I'm glad they never picked me, because I would be annoyed working there. And it seemed like the people that did work there, they were cool and everything. But I think they worked there just thinking to themselves, okay, I'm here. I can't wait to leave someday until I find something better. And that's all it was. No biggie. No biggie. I think I did 4 weeks there. No, 6 weeks, working 3 days a week there, because it was like the class credit. Got my credit. Everything was cool. Everything was fine. Then came near the end of 96. It was the springtime, the last I think it was the last 6 weeks before you graduated 11th grade. I joined. I just finished playing baseball, which that is another story in its entirety. I'll tell the fullest. That is a long story. Well, after baseball ended, that BS class was available again, and I told my counselor, "Hey, can I take this class again, just to take it to work at Toys R Us?" He looks at me. You sure? I said, "Yeah." And it was funny because my best friend, who I'm still friends with to this day, Frank, um, you could take wood shop, like all this manly stuff. And I always tell him I liked economics. I liked all this other stuff. And he looked at me like, what? And I said, that's just the way I was. So I said, let me take this class again. I took the class again. And I remember the same teacher was there. She's like, you're back? I said, yeah, but this time I want to work at Toys R Us. And she said, oh, we always need people working there. And I learned years later now, that's pretty much because it was free labor. Get the school kids there to help. And then the people that worked there didn't have to bust their butt as much because I don't know what the pay rate was back then. I have no idea. I know when I got my first job at Subway the following year, my hour was like, I think it was like $6 an hour. And I worked like 40, 50 hours a week sometimes because, well, that's drama in itself, but I'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the school credits. So I work at Toys R Us. First day there, I'm introduced to this guy. I don't even know what his name was. I remember I was just in awe because I'm like, I'm working here now for the school, and I had my little name tag that said my name and everything. It was pretty cool. I thought maybe I'll work in the video games or restock the toys. I mean, because now if you go to Toys R Us back then in 1996, they still had a lot of cool stuff there that people wish they had now, which you probably see on eBay all the time now or whatnot or OfferUp and all that kind of stuff. Well, so as my first job there, first thing the guy looks at me and goes, "You're all from the school?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Here, come here." Takes me to the back room, and I got to see all the bikes that are like in boxes where they got put together. I'm thinking, I hope I don't have to do that. He looks at me and goes, "See this trough? All these troughs of where the diapers and boxes." He goes, "I want you to fill all that. That's your job for the next 4 hours. Fill out all those troughs." And in my head, I'm thinking, people have babies like crazy. They need to be filled. And he was right. This place needed to be filled like crazy all the time. I was filling troughs, filling so many diapers, and it was. And when I had my break, the break room was right by the glass. This is like a glass menagerie where you got to see all the video games in display and everything else. And at the time, the Sega Saturn had just come out, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, the Sega Saturn and the Sega CD!" So everyone's like, "Wow, look how cool it is!" Because you saw video motion and all that stuff. So I always passed by when on my break. But when my break ended, when going out, I always had parents stopping me saying, do you have this? I don't know what game my kid likes." I'm like, "What's the character?" "Oh, it's these people fighting," and I'm like, "Virtual Fighter for the Sega Saturn." And they're like, "Oh, it's not for the Genesis?" I go, "No, it's not for the Genesis. It's for the Sega Saturn." Or someone say, "Oh, there's a Mario Greatest Hits game," and it was the Super Nintendo version of Mario All Stars. And I said, "That's Mario All Stars." And I had to show them this and that because in Nintendo games, I think were done by that time, but they were still selling them, and I enjoyed that. But the guy's like, "Raw, fill the troughs, fill the troughs, fill the troughs," and I did. It was great. I had a great time. When all that stuff ended, class was done. Got my credits, and I remember before my senior year hit, all I needed to do now was just get like I think it was like 30 something credits, and I graduated. And I told Carlos, I said, "I can't wait. We're done. Job is almost done." In excitement. Well, that's my story about extra credits, and I can't wait to talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye.